Good evening, folks. My name is Mantis Sebastian, and I typically do tobacco reviews in a series called In the Air Tonight, where I review different types of pipe tobacco. But I've been tempted to try something different here. I've always wanted to talk a little bit about art, history, philosophy, and a little religion as well. So I've decided to take a leap of faith and start that new series. Brought to you here from my basement office. And without further ado, welcome to Smokes from the Underground. Now, I'm smoking some From Beyond by Cornell and Deal. Very rich, brooding blend with a lot of Latakia. And I'm also drinking a bit of Madeira here as well. If you notice, I winked when I said I decided to take a leap of faith. That's because today I am going to talk about the philosopher who coined that term. And that philosopher's name is Søren Kierkegaard, who's a Danish philosopher from the early 1800s. Now, Kierkegaard has two works that I was particularly interested in reading. One of them is Either Or, which is arguably his most famous work, and the one that I'll be talking about today, since I just finished that. And the other is Fear and Trembling, which I'd like to start soon. So Either Or focuses on the unique human condition where you actually have to choose how to live your life. And in the beginning, he provides two different diametrically opposed routes that a man can take. And the way this book is set up is this sort of letters between two different individuals. One individual embraces the aesthetic life, the hedonistic, sort of Dionysian pursuit of pleasure. And the other individual exemplifies the ethical mode of existence. And throughout the book, these two opposing ideas sort of dismantle each other. Let's start with the hedonistic aesthetic life. It's great in the sense that it fights boredom. Boredom seems to be the root of all evil here. But the problem with it is that through rotating these crops and pursuing one pleasure after another, your life sort of starts to become hollow and meaningless. You get hungry, you eat a sandwich, and you're satiated. But like that, you're hungry again. So it represents the ephemeral nature of dopamine and things that bring you joy. But it's fun. The ethical life, on the other hand, or the ethical mode of existence, may be seen as more boring. But it provides meaning. And this individual in the book actually lives by code and tries to convince the other individual to get married, to contribute to society, and to live by a more moral framework. But you miss out on the sort of scorpacciata, which is an Italian word, I believe, which means to savor the seasons. You know, like during fall, you drink your pumpkin spice lattes and go hunting. And during Christmas, you eat your Christmas ham. And during winter, you ski. And In the spring, you're fishing and hiking, and in the summer, you're swimming. These are all pursuits of worldly pleasure that are nice and can sort of be distracting. You miss out on when you live the pure, ethical mode of existence, you miss out on the pumpkin spice lattes and the sex and the drugs and the rock and roll and the experiences. So they're both flawed. And as you're reading either or, you're questioning, well, Kierkegaard, what do you choose? What do you prescribe? Because it's not entirely clear. And the arguments are both pretty sufficient in that they dismantle each other. And that's when you get to the crux of either or, where Kierkegaard makes his proposal. There's a third option here. And that is what he calls the religious life. The religious life is complicated. And this is where that leap of faith comes in. Because it's hard to reconcile the Athens with the Jerusalem. Athens being the birthplace of philosophy and reason. Jerusalem, the birthplace of the Christian faith. Now, in Denmark at the time, the majority of people were Christian. Almost everybody was Christian. So people accepted the existence of God as an objective truth. Kierkegaard didn't like that because he thought that these people, in just taking for granted that God exists, never really exercised their faith. Didn't have a true faith because they didn't wrestle with it. The masses of Christians who were just going through the motions. Kierkegaard says that faith is ultimately illogical. That's why it can be very difficult to argue with an atheist. They want objective evidence, and your subjective evidence is not sufficient. But in order to be a true man of faith, Kierkegaard says you have to become the knight of faith. Go to the edge of that cliff and leap and hope, pray, and believe that God will catch you instead of just falling into the abyss. Kierkegaard says here, to have faith is to lose your mind and to gain God. Now, some people might find this daunting. I actually find it to be quite comforting. You're encountered with this existential crisis while reading this, in this choice that you have to make. And it's an irrational choice if you do decide to become the knight of faith. And with that always comes doubt. And I have always been a person who felt guilty by my own doubts about faith. So this is actually comforting in the sense that Kierkegaard is sort of saying that faith requires doubt. And that, in a way, is what true faith is. Despite all of the doubts, I put on my armor, I pick up my sword, I grab my shield, I mount my horse, and I charge on. Thanks for sticking with me today. This has been Smokes from the Underground. Cheers.